Hello, my name is Zena Woods, and today I'm going to talk about the subject of confidence in relation to interpreters. Now, some interpreters are very confident in themselves, and some are, but at the same time have a very large ego, and some are not very confident in themselves, and they don't trust their own abilities. So that is going to be the topic that I'm discussing today. So imagine yourself going to a job as an interpreter and you have a break. The break is finished, you get and you make eye contact with someone and you think, "Oh, who is that?" They are and they are and you might be questioning, are they an ally to the deaf community? And you think, "Wow, they are very smart. They know all of the various language and lingo that we have to use." And makes me feel like I need to prove myself that I can do this work. And really, most interpreters around their personalities, they have two parts. And is that bad? No, not at all. So one is more of a humble personality, and one is more of a confident personality. And they seem to conflict, but in truth, they don't. And that's good. Now, Brandon Arthur had drafted an article a while back that said real interpreters must know how to self-analyze and understand themselves. It's a very critical thing. If they can't self-analyze, that means they will never develop and they will eventually their skills will fall. Now let's look at these two personality types, humble and confident. And if too much of either one can become a problem, because if you're too humble, you're not very self-assured, you're not very confident at all. Now, if you're too confident, you could become big-headed and have a large ego. So, and with humble, you could also become scared and not really trust yourself as an interpreter or your skills, and you're not comfortable. And you could also even maybe feel deep down inside you're not working to improve, even though you're working at various places, but you're really not a good fit, and you're not ready, you're not skilled, you haven't developed fully yet. But if an interpreter is working hard to develop their skills and improve and accepts the right kind of jobs, the right kind of work, then it's all okay. Now, if you have a big ego problem or really just a large amount or a very low amount of self-esteem, we have to protect against that problem, or we have to go against that. And how do we do that? It's going to be it's going to be what I'm about to explain, which is from an article about how to self-analyze, how we don't want to become isolated, and also want continued development. Now, the idea of self-analysis and reflection also is something that we have to do. And you may think, well, how? And I have a plan to show you. As interpreters, there are things that we have to pick and choose. Now, there's a group that you can join called Observation. Next, find an interpreter who is very experienced and very knowledgeable and shadow them, and they can be your mentor. After that, you could be interning with, observing, working with, and discussing with things with another interpreter. Now, you could find a deaf person themselves who is very knowledgeable linguistically, storytelling, very gestural, very skilled, and they could be your mentor as well. And you could show them your work and your videos for them to help you. Now, also go to workshops and conferences. Don't just pick a random one. Find the right one for your goals. Find a way to develop a new plan for yourself, new trainings and new things that you want to do. Because it's very independent study based, where you find one skill that you want to improve on at a time. And you use research, you read articles, you watch videos, and you find people who are experts in that one skill, and they will help you apply it. And now you can join various forums and trainings that talk in depth about a very specific topic, very in depth. Now, some people use a life coach, and that's a personal choice. And the idea that it helps develop confidence too. And the last one I'm going to put out there for this plan is to research, read articles, and write, and even possibly teach something to someone, because when you're teaching, you will learn even more. Now, really, that big ego comes from a lack of knowledge about your own weaknesses. So, oh, I have a lot of this experience, and I know my weaknesses, or someone who is also very experienced knows their own. And really, a lot of people in the deaf community that we interpret for, they don't like to see people with large egos. But if the interpreter is feeling scared or feeling unconfident, that's something that the community tends to not like as well. What they really want to see is that we interpreters can do it, that we're confident. Now, if they see the interpreter feeling confident, they will relax a little bit more, and conversation, communication will go smoother. Sometimes I notice interpreters that are a little scared and not necessarily confident, and it's concerning because it's like, well, can the interpreter do it? Are they able to? They become hesitant with communication, and that's not good. Sometimes when I go to work or when there's a job and there's a huge audience, and they come up to the interpreter, they say, "Oh, wow, it was so beautiful. It looks like you were dancing." And most of us interpreters feel awkward. We don't want that, to hear those accolades like that. But other interpreters feel that it's fine, it's not a big deal, and they'll continue interpreting music or something or comical. There's variations. As far as various interpreters that are comfortable being in the limelight. And I feel that it's appropriate that my creative expression, or that it is my creative expression, but other people just don't like to do artistic interpreting. For instance, with a newsletter, the editorial for Gallaudet, the column, their sister organization, They had drafted an article about how signing does not equal action. And what that means is all of the people want to see interpreters. Oh, not everyone is comfortable with interpreters interpreting gesturally or artistically. Now, it's important to be humble because most of the time interpreters, we're not actors. If you yourself feel, oh, I'm important, I need to express myself and be creative, but should you bring that to your work as an interpreter? Well, there should involve in things like music and theater, you need to involve that creativity and that expression. That is important. And will you see that in the newspaper or now in Seattle, Washington, there is a musical group that uses the same signs and they've used it and it's been around for many years and the community has complained that the person who is signing loves signing in front of the audience and he feels proud of himself. Okay, but the deaf community also feels that he's not qualified. And it's really sad that we as community interpreters sometimes will really become big-headed and have a large ego. It's embarrassing. I remember one day looking back, going to California State University, and every year they have a conference for interpreters that they flock to. Now, the professor, Lauren Ims, stood on stage and looking back, looked back at all the interpreters, and I think it was about 20 years ago, and there's a few that had a big head. Now, they were certified, their personality, and they were very expressive. They were showing off a little bit, and she kind of laughed, and then she kind of she kind of stood back, and I noticed around in the news and discussions about stories and even hearing rumors with different places and people they about discussing their problems with interpreting. Now, people agree interpreters that are skilled in this profession, that's really awesome. That's a good job for them. But how do we thank them? How do we applaud them? Should we award them? Should we clap our hands or anything like that? And people's opinions have varied. And it's a little sticky. We have to figure out, okay, well, hang on. I've got two opposing viewpoints, and how do I do that alone? You can't. It has to be the interpreter has to be in the deaf community, in those discussions, and knowledgeable of what is acceptable and what people do not accept and what they don't feel is right. How can we as interpreters find the perfect balance between humble and confident? That's my question to you. Now, it's really important to know yourself. I know myself, and I continue to learn. I'm involved with the deaf community. Now, you should remember a few things. It's okay to ask for feedback from the deaf. Well, really, many deaf people just don't tend to give feedback. So, like, oh, your work was good. Here's some things that you could change. No, they're really not very, they tend not to be very skilled at that. It's just not actually really appropriate. So it's not really okay because they have their own life and it's not really their focus. So don't expect that from them. Now, to ask someone else from feedback who does know about interpreting, that's okay. Now, and it's really just going to be, it's a deaf person and a hearing person, and their communication is going to flow, and when it's done, it's done. And you just keep going. Now, you need to be focused, though, on the topic, on the interview, on the discussion, whatever is being said. Now, there was an article, and it talked about sign language interpreters with hearing people and that do not sign, and it also explained why they have problems themselves with interpreters that have a big ego. Now, there are many people that are not very satisfied with the current interpreters, and the main reason is because of an attitude problem. Now, we as interpreters must find the balance between being humble and having humility and confidence if we're going to be good allies for the deaf, hard of hearing, deaf-blind, and hearing consumers. Now, interpreters vary in personality, certifications, skills, knowledge, experience, and that's good. That means that there's a different interpreter for pretty much every situation, and it can all work out. But it's important that we do our best to match and be qualified, to match that situation and be qualified for it. And what's also very important is respect, as well as also if we focus on the message itself and facilitate that communication, but we forget about our self-analysis or ourselves, and we forget about the fear and focus on the work, we will succeed. Because communication is the goal of our job, of our profession. If we as interpreters are successful and we have that perfect balance and we have that confidence in our communication facilitating skills, everything will go smoothly.